On the 6th of January, New Orleans begins to put on its mask. Twelfth Night opens the Carnival season. Christmas disappears behind king cake and music and the promise of another celebration to come. And at about 11 that morning, a door opens on St. Charles Avenue. Ylenia Carrisi steps out of the LeDale Hotel. Her passport stays inside. So do her camera, her notebooks, her clothes, her backpack. She does not come back. She is 23 years old, the granddaughter of a Hollywood legend, the daughter of the most famous singing couple in Italy. And on the first day of the season of masks, in a city built on music and water, she simply walks out of the world. This is the disappearance of Ylenia Carrisi. You're watching Madame Noir, the cases they don't tell you in English. Stay to the end, you decide what happened. Before the mystery, there was a young woman trying to build a life beyond the famous name she had inherited. Ylenia Maria Sol Carrisi was born in Rome in November 1970. Her mother is Romina Power, actress, singer, and daughter of the American film star Tyrone Power. Her father is Bano, one of the most beloved voices Italy has ever produced. Together, her parents sang about happiness to millions of people. It was a childhood lived under bright lights, and Ylenia kept trying to step out of them. What she wanted was quieter. She wanted to write. She studied literature at King's College London. Her mother has said she came within a single exam of finishing her degree, and then she stopped because something else was pulling at her. She reportedly sold some of her belongings, took a backpack and a journal, and went looking for the world on her own terms. Not as Albano's daughter, not as Tyrone Power's granddaughter, just as a traveler with a notebook. Remember that, as this story darkened. She was not running from her life. She was reaching for something in it. Madame Noir, if you like the quiet ones, subscribe. Now, let me take you to the city. By the winter of 1993, that road had carried her across Central America. She spent months in Belize, jungle, turquoise water, quiet villages, and always the notebook. Those who met her described someone gentle, curious, unguarded, a traveler, not a tourist. According to later accounts from her family, her brother Yari himself, a seasoned traveler, tried to surprise her that Christmas and reached a small Belizean village only to learn she had left the day before. On a bus, heading north, the destination she had chosen was a city she already knew, New Orleans. She had been here before, and for a young writer drawn to the strange and the beautiful, it is easy to see why she came back. New Orleans in early January is a warm, half-lit ghost of a city. The streetcars ring down St. Charles Avenue. Jazz leaks out of open doors. The Christmas crowds are thinning, and in their place the first masks of Carnival begin to appear. It is a place that wears beauty and unease in the same breath. She left Belize the day after Christmas and rode north into it. To understand these last days, you have to understand the city she walked into. Twelfth Night is not a small thing in New Orleans. It is the night the carnival season is born. The first king cakes cut, the first masks lifted, the first small parades moving through the dark. For the weeks that follow, the whole city quietly agrees to become someone else. Faces vanish behind sequins and feathers. Strangers dance with strangers. The ordinary rules loosen. It is joyful. And for a young writer with a notebook, it must have felt like walking straight into a story worth writing. But the city of masks is also a city where a face is easy to lose, where a woman can move through a laughing crowd, and the crowd will not remember her. Ylenia arrived just as New Orleans began, joyfully, to forget its own face. Here is where the postcard ends and the real story begins. The place Ylenia checked into was not a grand hotel in the French Quarter. It was the LeDale, a cheap hotel in the 700 block of St. Charles Avenue, a $23 room about 5 blocks from the quarter, close enough to walk into the music, close enough to reach the river, and she was not alone. Inside that room was a second bed and a man named Alexander Masakela, a street musician who played the cornet on the corners of the quarter. 54 years old, more than 30 years older than she was. We have to be careful here and fair. By the accounts that survive, Ylenia had met Masakela on an earlier visit to New Orleans and found him again when she returned. He was with her when she checked in, and this detail matters. Ylenia specifically asked for a room with 2 beds. The hotel manager did not take them for a couple, so set aside the easy story. What we have is stranger and quieter. A young daughter of 2 famous entertainers living in a $23 room beside a street musician more than 30 years older. In the last days anyone can account for. Picture the arrangement honestly. Masakela played cornet for tips on the streets of New Orleans. At night, he shared a cheap room on St. Charles with a woman young enough to be his daughter, a woman who had asked for a bed of her own. To the people who ran the hotel, they did not look like a couple. So what were they? A friendship, a young writer collecting a character for the book she meant to write. A trusting traveler who had attached herself to exactly the wrong person. Every answer is a guess. The only 2 people who truly knew are a woman who disappeared and a man whose account never answered the central question. To understand what haunts this case, you have to look at what stayed in that room. Masakela, it is reported, had a history of drug use. That fact matters, but it proves neither that Ylenia was taking drugs, nor that he supplied them. Her father would later come to believe that drugs may have played some part in her disappearance. Her mother has rejected that. Without a body, without toxicology, without a reliable witness to her condition that night, an altered state remains a possibility, not a conclusion. What we do know is this: her family last heard her voice on New Year's Eve, a call from a city she had only just returned to, and then silence. Her family was accustomed to hearing from her during her travels. That silence was the first sign that something had shifted. But they were an ocean away. They had no way of knowing that the silence already had a date, and a place, and a river, On the morning of the 6th of January, around 11 o'clock, Ylenia walked out of the LeDale, alone, into the ordinary daylight of a city getting ready to celebrate. And she left everything behind: her passport, her camera, her notebooks, her clothes, her backpack. A traveler who lived out of that bag walked into the day without it. Whatever she believed she was doing that morning, she did not pack for it. Think about what a passport meant to Ylenia. It was the single most important thing she owned. It was how a girl from a famous Italian family moved, unnoticed, through Belize, through Mexico, through the American South. It was her freedom and her anonymity folded into one small book. And she left it at the hotel. The same is true of the notebooks. She had been taking notes for the book she hoped to write, and she walked out into the daylight without a single one of them. Those objects cannot tell us why she left without them. They suggest only that she expected to return soon, or that whatever happened next gave her no opportunity to prepare. And now we come to the moment that has haunted this case for 3 decades. That evening by the Mississippi River in Woldenberg Park, security guards reported an unknown woman. One of them, a guard named Albert Cordova, said he found her sitting alone on a wharf at the edge of the black water. When he asked her to leave the area, she answered him. The exact words have been retold in different ways over the years, but the line that survives is this: "Well, I belong in the water anyway." And then, he said, she dove, head first, into the Mississippi. At first she swam strongly out toward the middle of the river, 100 yards by his account. For a moment this was not a tragedy. It was a woman swimming in a cold river at night. And then a passing tanker came through. The wake rose. The huge waves broke over her, and she began to struggle, to scream for help. The guard stood on the bank, helpless, and watched the water take her under. The Coast Guard search. The Mississippi at New Orleans is vast and fast, a current that can carry a body all the way to the Gulf. They found nothing, no body, but here is the thing that has never gone away. It was never proven that the woman on that wharf was Ylenia at all. Cordova himself would later say he could not be certain it was her. One night, one river, one woman whose face no one could swear to. It is either the tragic heart of this case or a coincidence that pointed the whole story in the wrong direction. And consider what the guard was actually describing. Not a woman pushed, not a woman dragged. A woman who walked to the edge of the water on her own, said something almost calm, and went into the river. If that woman was Ylenia, the testimony still does not tell us why she entered the water. A deliberate attempt to die is one possibility. So are confusion, intoxication, an impulsive act, or a swim that turned fatal when the vessel passed. Her cries for help make certainty impossible. And if that woman was not Ylenia, then somewhere beyond that wharf the real ending is still out there, and an entire search spent its best years watching the wrong stretch of river. Back at the LeDale, the room told its own story. On the 31st of January, Alexander Masakela was arrested, but the arrest had nothing to do with Ylenia Carrisi. According to case summaries, a former girlfriend had accused him of rape. He was released less than 2 weeks later for lack of evidence. He was questioned about Ylenia's disappearance, but he was never charged with causing it, assisting it, or concealing what happened to her. But unanswered questions remain. According to the hotel manager, after Ylenia disappeared, Masakela showed staff her passport and tried to pay the room bill with her unsigned traveler's check. The hotel refused them. He was evicted, leaving possessions behind, including Ylenia's backpack. None of this proves that he harmed her, but it explains why her family could never treat him as an irrelevant figure, so her belongings ended up where she would never reach them. The passport a traveler cannot cross a border without. The camera, the notebooks she filled every day, the backpack she had carried through Central America and into the United States. All of it left behind in the last city in which she was reliably seen. It took time for the alarm to reach across the ocean. On the 18th of January, a family friend contacted New Orleans police and reported Ylenia missing 12 days after she was last seen. By then, the trail was cold. The season of Carnival was rising toward its peak, and a famous family was flying into a city that had already lost her. Before this became an old mystery, it was a family searching from one street to the next. Romina Power later recalled that she and Albano remained in New Orleans for almost a month. They retraced Ylenia's movements. They spoke to witnesses. Albano would later say that he reconstructed her final night hour by hour and spoke with Masakela himself. According to later reports, the family also turned to private investigators. They pursued sightings in the United States, in Italy, and elsewhere in Europe. The surviving record does not tell us what those searches cost, but every new report demanded something: time, money, and the courage to hope again. There were anonymous claims that Ylenia was alive. Reports placed her in religious communities and far from New Orleans. None produced a confirmed trace. Over time, her disappearance became content. Magazines and television programs promised new revelations. Albano would later accuse parts of the media of exploiting Ylenia's name for attention and money. For the public, it was another mystery. For her parents, every false lead reopened the same wound. This is what came before the legal declaration of death. Not a father who gave up after a few weeks, nearly 2 decades of witnesses, searches, private investigators, and hope repeatedly raised and repeatedly broken. Then, 1 year after court finally declared Ylenia dead, investigators asked whether one of a serial killer's unidentified victims could have been Ylenia. More than 20 years after Ylenia disappeared, another man entered the case, Keith Hunter Jesperson, the serial murderer known as the Happy Face Killer. Jesperson had confessed years earlier to killing a woman he picked up near Tampa. He said she called herself Suzanne, and investigators had been told that Ylenia sometimes used that same name while traveling in the United States. In 2015, American authorities asked whether Jesperson, as unidentified victim, could have been Ylenia. The reconstructed face looked similar enough for investigators to obtain DNA from the Carrisi family. For several weeks, the possibility seemed horrifyingly real. Then the result arrived. The DNA did not match. The happy face killer had murdered someone, but not Ylenia Carrisi. In 2023, genetic genealogy finally returned that victim's real name, Suzanne L.K. Jellenberg, another woman whose identity had been lost for almost 3 decades. The lead had answered one family's question, while leaving Ylenia as untouched. So what happened to Ylenia Carrisi? Lay the clues on the table, and there are 4 doors. Weigh each one honestly. Door 1, the woman in the river was Ylenia. She spoke a strange sentence to a guard, went into the Mississippi, and the passing tanker, and the current did the rest. There is a witness, but there is no body, and the witness himself was not sure it was her. Door 2, an accident in an altered state. A young woman far from home, possibly not herself that night, near a deadly river in the dark. It fits the water, it fits the doubt, but it rests on things we cannot prove. Door 3. He was questioned about Ylenia's disappearance, but he was never charged with causing it, assisting it, or concealing what happened to her. But unanswered questions remain. According to the hotel manager, after Ylenia disappeared, Masakela showed staff her passport and tried to pay the room bill with her unsigned traveler's check. Her backpack was left behind. None of that is proof, but it is why her family could never treat him as irrelevant. For a time, a far more frightening face appeared behind this door. The happy face killer. He was tested against her DNA and ruled out. Masakela was questioned and never charged. No public evidence has ever established that he harmed her, but that is not the same as proving that he knew nothing. Door 4. Ylenia survived. That possibility divides into 2 very different stories. In one, she chose a new name and a life beyond the reach of her famous family. In the other, the silence was never her choice. From the beginning, Romina Power feared that her daughter was being held somewhere against her will. She later considered an even darker possibility, that Ylenia had been drawn into a world of trafficking or sexual exploitation. No witness organization, ransom demand, or physical evidence has ever proved that theory, and Masakela was never charged in connection with it. But if Ylenia survived under coercive control, threatened, isolated, moved from place to place, or forced to live under another identity, then decades without contact would not necessarily mean that she abandoned her family. It could mean that she was never free to return. There is no proof that this happened. Nobody has ever resolved the question in either direction. Absence of proof is not proof that she survived. It is only the reason this final door cannot be locked. Her father eventually came to believe that the woman in the river was Ylenia. In 2013, he asked a court to declare his daughter legally dead. The declaration followed in 2014. Her mother chose something else. An open door. Romina still speaks of 4 children, not 3. She says she feels that Ylenia is somewhere. She says she dreams about her. She has also spoken to people whom she believes possess supernatural abilities. Dreams are not evidence. Neither are mediums or a mother's intuition. But they explain why, after more than 30 years, Romina still refuses to speak about her daughter only in the past. Maybe the river holds the answer, maybe New Orleans does, or maybe Ylenia survived under another name in another place, unable or unwilling to find her way home. If she is alive, her silence does not necessarily mean that she stopped loving her family. It may mean that the choice to contact them was taken from her. 32 years ago, Ylenia walked out of a room with 2 beds. Her passport remained behind, her camera, her notebooks, her backpack. Everything except the answer. A court can declare a person dead. It cannot tell us what happened. And until someone can, the final door remains open. This was Madame Noir. Some doors never close.